What if the most dangerous weapon in the world is invisible? Not a bomb, not a bullet, but something that strikes with utter silence. Pause for a moment and imagine. A cold, clammy fog rolls off the Baltic Sea one night in the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad. The world seems asleep, but suddenly, air raid sirens pierce the stillness. Without warning, a missile glides unseen through the mist. A single explosion splits the night, rattling military bases and shattering windows across nearby towns. Panic flares, because for the first time since the end of the Second World War, a German missile has detonated on Russian soil. News ricochets across the globe in seconds. Journalists frantically dial sources. Berlin issues only a terse, cryptic statement. We are verifying details. There is no denial, no explanation. In Washington, the highest officials are already in secure briefings. The world holds its collective breath, fearing that the old nightmare of Europe at war is returning. Yet this was no accident, nor reckless aggression. The strike was a calculated test, an audacious probe meant to force Moscow's hand, to see how Russia would react to an unambiguous Western incursion. This crisis is not about the rubble of buildings. It is about something far more dangerous. The moment a nation realizes it is losing control, losing influence, and losing the power to protect its own people, before a single nuclear warhead ever leaves its silo. How did a lone missile ignite the most perilous standoff in decades, without a single city destroyed? The answer lies in a new, shadowy game of power, where dominance is measured not in firepower, but in the ability to paralyze an entire society without warning. Everything changed within hours of the explosion. As Western leaders scrambled to respond, Russia's true answer was already unfolding, silent, devastating, and almost completely unseen. A new kind of war is taking shape, one where speed, stealth, and technological prowess matter far more than brute force. Forget the grainy black-and-white footage of tanks rolling across borders. Today, a single, precisely calculated strike, coupled with a storm of digital attacks, can tip the global balance of power overnight. Picture once again that freezing, foggy night along Russia's western border. In a remote bunker, radar operators notice a blip, something moving low and fast, cutting through the murk with eerie silence. Moments later, the explosion lights up a Russian military depot, flames soaring above the pine trees. Glass shatters for miles around. The blast wave ripples out, a warning to everyone who hears it. Within minutes, headlines detonate across every European news site. A German missile has struck deep inside Russian territory. Alarms blare from Berlin to Moscow. NATO command centers are flooded with urgent warnings. But everywhere, officials stick to cautious, clipped statements. The situation is under review. In Washington, however, a select group of leaders was already expecting the news. The strike had been pre-authorized, its purpose carefully calculated. A high-stakes experiment to map Russia's response in a new era of conflict. This was no mistake. The attack was a deliberate provocation, a probe to reveal how Russia would handle a direct, digital age challenge. Here, every second was a fuse, every signal a potential flashpoint for disaster or, perhaps, for restraint. Why should this matter to you, someone perhaps thousands of kilometers away? Because the rules of power are changing faster than most of us realize. Failing to understand these new forms of conflict, where an invisible attack can freeze entire countries, leaves not just nations, but every one of us, dangerously exposed to crises that look nothing like the wars we learned about in history class. But how did Russia actually respond to such a brazen act? The world was about to be blindsided by a move no one had anticipated. Russia's answer was not a barrage of missiles or tanks. Instead, in a decision that would set a precedent for the century, Russia rewrote the rules of modern conflict and left all of Europe reeling. Instead of retaliating with fire and ruin, Russia chose a weapon even more chilling, a silent shockwave that targeted the nerves of Europe itself, paralyzing entire societies without spilling a single drop of blood. This was not unprecedented. Cyberspace attacks have already foreshadowed this kind of warfare. Think back to the Stuxnet virus, which crippled Iran's nuclear program in the early years of this century, or the mass blackouts in Ukraine in the year 2015, when hackers turned off the lights for hundreds of thousands. In the shadowed corridors of the Kremlin, Russia's top leadership gathered before sunrise. The atmosphere was tense but precise. Every order was measured, every word chosen with care. The directive was clear: strike back instantly, but do not cross the line into outright devastation. The goal was dominance, without destruction. In mere minutes, Russia's rapid response Grom units and elite electronic warfare teams sprang to life. NATO's monitors watched in disbelief as airfields from Pskov to Murmansk and Leningrad erupted with synchronized activity. Fighter jets scrambled, missile batteries rolled out. Radar screens hummed with an intensity not seen since the darkest days of the Cold War. This coordinated surge wasn't just for show. It was a demonstration of readiness, a message that Russia could move at a moment's notice. Panic spread across Europe with the speed of rumor. Military headquarters from Warsaw to Berlin triggered evacuation protocols. Sirens howled as governments dove into crisis mode. But the real attack had no sound. Within moments, all communications in Germany vanished. Russian cyber teams and electronic jammers unleashed a digital blackout, severing satellites and radio networks in under 60 seconds. Still, no cities burned. Instead, Russian forces launched hypersonic missiles, each carrying inert decoys rather than explosives. These missiles screamed across the Baltic night into German airspace, reaching blinding speeds. The message was unmistakable. Russia could target any capital in Europe within minutes, but, for now, it chose to show restraint. Berlin woke to a new reality. At sunrise, hundreds of silent drones hovered over government buildings, their presence both intimidating and inscrutable. Electromagnetic pulses rippled across the city, plunging it into total darkness. Every stoplight froze. Government computers went dead. Cell towers collapsed into silence. Emergency calls failed. For hours, Berlin was cut off from the world, unable to send or receive a single command. The psychological shock was enormous. Across the continent, dread settled in. One wrong move could have triggered all-out war, but Russia's restraint revealed a terrifying new kind of dominance, one that could overwhelm an entire society without ever firing a live round. In some ways, it echoed the tension of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the world teetered on the edge of nuclear war. But the weapons here were digital and psychological, not physical. As daylight crept in and power flickered back, Europe's leaders faced an entirely new world. The rules of conflict had changed, and nobody was sure what the next move should be. The diplomatic scramble began before the first cup of coffee in every major capital. With old playbooks useless, leaders confronted an urgent question. How do you negotiate with an adversary who can switch off your society in seconds without warning? When the Russian missiles failed to detonate, the world awoke to a new kind of terror. Invisible, precise, unstoppable. Overnight, power was no longer measured in megatons, but in megabytes. Russia's response was not a counterstrike, but a chilling ultimatum. We do not attack, we warn. The next step would be the last. Decision-makers everywhere froze, haunted by the question, what would happen if Moscow decided not to hold back next time? Within minutes, the blackout spread. Power vanished in Berlin, then Paris. Banking networks froze, bringing trade to a halt. Entire governments became isolated, unable to communicate even with themselves. Emergency lights glowed, but the trusted systems, the heartbeat of modern life, were gone. This was a scenario once imagined only in doomsday novels, now unfolding in real time. NATO and the United States scrambled to respond. Confusion reigned as leaders demanded answers and assigned blame. Urgent talks erupted, but behind closed doors, even the closest allies hesitated. Was it worth risking the total collapse of Europe's digital nervous system to escalate further? The true shock was not physical destruction, but helplessness. For the first time in modern history, European capitals realized their security could be switched off like a lamp by invisible hands from thousands of kilometers away. In a single night, the illusion of sovereignty and safety was shattered. Diplomatic hotlines rang non-stop from Berlin, Brussels, and Washington, all pleading for negotiation. Moscow took its time. Each unanswered call, each silent minute, only confirmed that Russia now held every card. The cost was immense. The illusion of European security evaporated. Governments faced a reckoning, their reputations built on promises of safety now exposed as hollow. In those tense hours, a new global balance of fear quietly took root. So what do we learn from a night with no explosions, when the entire world order shifted in silence? If war can break a continent without a single bomb, what will protect us next time? The rules of conflict have changed, and so must we. Forget everything you think you know about war. The new battlefield is silent and unseen, and the old rules can vanish overnight. Just as the introduction of tanks in the First World War or nuclear weapons in the Second World War forced nations to rethink everything, today's invisible arsenal demands a new kind of vigilance. Russia's answer to the German missile did not come as fire or ash. Instead, it proved that true dominance no longer depends on explosions or ruined skylines. Today, the greatest weapon is the power to sow chaos, crippling entire societies in minutes, without a single direct hit. Think of the ransomware attacks that have shut down hospitals in the United States and Europe, or the cyber assaults on infrastructure in Estonia in the year 2007. Each was a warning shot for the digital age. Electronic warfare and cyber attacks now stand alongside tanks and missiles as tools of power. With a few lines of code, satellites go blind, government channels fall silent, and the daily rhythms of millions can be erased. Suddenly, victory belongs not to the largest army, but to whoever controls or disrupts the world's information flow. No one is safe. In our hyper-connected world, a single digital attack can dissolve normal life before dawn. Imagine waking to silent phones, blacked-out cities, and cars frozen at every intersection. Not because of bombs, but because of invisible disruption. This is not speculation. In 2018, a cyber attack in Atlanta, Georgia, shut down city services for days, costing millions and sowing confusion. The old idea of deterrence, visible missiles, massive armies, has been replaced. Now, survival means defending fragile digital networks, and the most dangerous weapon is the power to switch off a continent with a keystroke. The world saw a taste of this in 2017, when the NotPetya cyber attack, attributed to Russian actors, spread across Ukraine and into the West, causing billions in damages and showing how quickly chaos could cross borders. If we refuse to adapt, we become the next victims. Every business, every government, every individual who depends on digital networks is now exposed. The next conflict may leave buildings standing, but it can still tear apart the fabric of society. This is not just a military challenge. It is a challenge for every person who relies on electricity, banking, medicine, and communication. A hospital without working computers, a bank without electronic records, a city without power. These are no longer distant nightmares, but real vulnerabilities. As the dust settled and Europe stared into a new future, one question echoed everywhere. What if the next strike is not seen or heard until it is too late? Are we prepared for a world where invisible weapons decide our fate? One night, a single missile shattered the old playbook. Do you still trust the rules you grew up with? Europe never saw a bomb fall, yet its lights went out. Across the continent, power grids flickered and died. Networks vanished. Leaders stared into darkness, helpless. There were no explosions, just invisible hands twisting technology, turning strength into sudden weakness. It echoed the lessons of the past, when the Maginot Line failed to stop a new kind of warfare. But now, the line is digital, and it can be crossed in the blink of an eye. This is not a story of burning cities. It is a warning. Everything you count on can be switched off in a heartbeat. The old answer was retaliation, fire, and rubble. The new conflict is colder, quicker, almost silent. No bodies in the streets, yet everyone loses control. Think your country, your money, your own phone are safe? Think again. The battlefield has moved. Now, a few lines of code can do what armies never could: erase the boundaries you thought protected you. Just as the rise of the internet redefined commerce, politics, and communication in less than one generation, the rise of digital warfare is rewriting the map of global power. Ignore these threats, and you risk everything: security, knowledge, even daily peace. If we cling to yesterday's guarantees, we surrender our future to those already playing by new rules. Can you trust the old promises when the world changed overnight? As silence replaces sirens, we must redefine safety. The challenge is not just to defend ourselves, but to recognize where the next attack might begin, and how little warning we will have. So what can be done? Nations must invest in resilient infrastructure, diversify energy grids, and train cyber response teams. On a personal level, individuals can safeguard digital identities, back up vital data, and learn the basics of digital hygiene. Schools should teach not only history and math, but also the fundamentals of cybersecurity. Governments must collaborate internationally, sharing threat intelligence in real time. Businesses must adopt robust cybersecurity protocols, test their defenses regularly, and plan for the day the networks go silent. Civil society should demand transparency about vulnerabilities and insist on realistic emergency planning. But above all, the first step is to admit the world has changed. The era of visible threats is fading. The age of invisible warfare has arrived. Only when we understand the new rules can we hope to survive, and perhaps even thrive. In the end, the most powerful weapon is not the missile or the drone, but the ability to shape uncertainty itself. One cold night in Kaliningrad proved that the greatest threat may be the one you never see coming. Will we be ready when silence falls?